Welcome to Let's Talk. Today we're going to talk about regular paints for hobby painting and model painting. So there's three brands that I use the most. You have Citadel paint, Army Painter, and Privateer Press, or the P3 paints. So starting off with Army Painter, good thing about their paints, they come in these nice little dropper bottles. They're not overly expensive, and they come in a wide variety of colors. As far as variety of color goes, Army Painter cannot be beat. Like, they have the most extensive range of colors. You know, if you think of a color that's completely random and off the walls that you made in Photoshop one day, they probably have it in a paint pot. So that's what makes Army Painter pretty awesome. Now, as far as actually using the paint goes, I don't like it very much, just because unless it's the exact color I need. Like, if I could find the same color in a different brand, I will go with a different brand. They're pretty gummy as they dry up a little bit. They don't really have a very smooth finish to it. And so that gumminess, as the paint sits on your plate and gets old, it can affect how it spreads on the model. Now, some people really like Army Painter, and they're a quick enough painter to where it doesn't matter, or they use a wet palette so the paint never really dries out. I'm not the best at that. So as far as for my painting techniques and how long it takes me to get through painting with a particular color, Army Painter is not the way I would go unless it's a color I can't find anywhere else. So it has great extensive range of color, but as far as its texture of paint, I'm not the biggest fan. Moving on, you have Citadel paints. They come in smaller little paint pots like this. They have a flip top lid, which most of the time stays open. So as far as construction goes, it's not too bad. As far as the paint pot goes, their biggest problem is that it is a flip top lid, meaning that it must be open to use it, and if you try and just dump some out, it's gonna go everywhere, or you'll end up wasting a lot of it. And so it tends to dry out because you have to leave the top open, or you're constantly opening and closing every time you use your brush. And like I said, I'm a pretty slow painter. It takes me a while to get through a color, so I'm not the biggest fan of that aspect. As far as the quality of paint goes, they have a pretty good variety of colors. Their pigment's not the strongest, so 2 thin coats, I'm sure everybody's heard that before from their various painting tutorials. 2 thin coats works best. If you want to use a red or a yellow from them, maybe 3 to 4 coats. Just because reds and yellows from most paint lines are pretty hard to cover. It's one of those weird colors. But as far as paint quality goes, it has a really nice smooth finish. So if you are going to use Citadel paints, what I would recommend is getting just plain dropper bottles. You can get empty ones from the Army Painter. You can get empty ones from US Plastics. I use US Plastics. They're 55 millimeter, and I can fit 2 to 3 paint pots in here depending on which brand it is. So third, we'll move on to my favorite and what I use the most, and that's Privateer Press. They do have a flip top lid, so as you can see, I have transferred most all of my paints into a dropper bottle. That way I'd only have to drop out what I use, and it doesn't dry out because, as said, I'm a pretty slow painter. So the thing I love the most about P3 paints is just the quality and smoothness of everything is fantastic. They don't dry out too fast, even if you just use a regular wheel palette. And beyond that, you really don't have to add a whole lot of water to get a nice smooth finish to it. It's mostly just whatever I can put on my brush, thin out the paint a little bit, and then I can paint with it, and it's totally fine. Whereas most other paint brands, you probably have to add 1/3 as much water as the paint, or even a 1-to-1 ratio to get a really smooth finish. So Privateer Press comes out pretty dang smooth to start. It has a really high pigment count. So what that means is that on average, I'll only need to paint once. Maybe twice, and since I have pretty shaky hands, I think that's a huge boon because I don't have the dexterity to really go in there and do multiple coats if I'm doing, like, let's say armor joints, or if I want to paint eye sockets or whatever. I don't want to have to go back 2, 3, 4 times if I want to use red or yellow or something like that. So for me, Privateer Press is fantastic. Most of their basic colors cover in 1 coat. If I want to use a yellow, a red, or an orange or something like that, maybe 2, maybe 3 coats tops. But yeah, for the most part, they're just a fantastic line of paints. Their biggest problem is that they take forever to restock. So if you can get a hand on these, I would totally do it. They're amazing. They're about $4 a pot, which is great. I buy all of my products from Games of Berkeley. They don't stock these regularly, but they can order them for you, and it's worth the wait. So that's all I have today as far as regular paints go. Next time, we're probably going to talk about primers and spray cans. So yeah, have a good one.